So with the 1988 Honda Accord with the LS swap, one of the main concerns or one of the main thoughts from the very beginning is, since this is a small car and it is a crazy big motor compared to what was in there before, how are we going to address cooling? And that's going to be figured out in this video. It's going to be handled by none other than Mishimoto.
And now, you're watching the If You Have a Fever, You Might Not Have It, and if you have it, you might not have a fever, but we're for damn sure checking your temperature channel of YouTube. Welcome to Bodie Vision.
Hey, so what's happening? Thanks so much for joining me on yet another video. So what we have right here, this radiator is going to be responsible for keeping that car cool, and I think it's going to do just that. So what I did is I measured the space that I had out here from that corner across there up to there, and that exact number I just searched to see if Mishimoto carried a radiator, and of course they did. This is the exact size that I needed, and it's going to fit perfectly, and it's going to take up the entire front end, and that was the goal. That's what we wanted to happen. We want as much cooling as possible, because this 5.7 liter V8 used to have a bigger radiator, and the radiator that was in here only cooled down to 1.8 or 2.0. I don't even remember what was in here before, but either way, what we have right now is going to handle it. And since the radiator is sitting so much lower than where the motor is going to sit, and that's just the nature of how this setup is, we had to go with an expansion tank. So this expansion tank, super nice, high quality, Mishimoto as well. That's actually for an E36, but it doesn't matter what it's for. Mishimoto makes it, it's gonna work for this car, and it's gonna be just fine. So what I'm thinking is the radiator, you know where that's gonna go. I'm gonna have to mess around with the expansion tank and put it where I think it should go, and that expansion tank needs to be higher than the motor. So it's gonna go somewhere back in this area, because the motor's over there, radiator's down there, so we want the expansion tank to be the highest point. So I think, what else is there to do except for throwing in the radiator and seeing what we got to do to figure out mounting? Also, one thing about this radiator, in the pictures, it shows that the outlet's an inlet. The inlet outlet is on the actual driver's side, and that's where their logo is, but I emailed them. They said it could be run like this either way, and that's, I don't know, you're not going to see the logo. It'll be fine. Big boy. All right. Get out the grinder. As I was measuring, I measured the amount of space that I was willing to use, not necessarily the amount of space that I had. There's just two little OEM brackets that we're not going to be using anyways, and that was to mount the old radiator. So we're just going to get those cut out, and then we should be able to see where this thing should ultimately live. Man, so first mock-up, just looking at this thing really quickly, this is gonna be simple. I mean, the way that the holes are, if you can see, the radiator came with a bunch of these threaded little bungs on there. So there's one there, one there, one there, and one there. So these are easy. We're just gonna have to drill a hole, catch that bung, drill a hole, catch the bung. I gotta weld a little plate to go in there, and I want that to come out completely so that we have all the strength. Then it's gonna catch that. And the cool thing about those bungs is this is just a standard, what you would know as a standard 10, which is actually a M6x1, and they actually have bungs on this side as well. So we're just gonna test it out just to see, and if you can see, that is the exact size that we need. These bungs are the same on all the sides. So this radiator is really friendly to allow you to mount it in pretty much any application. And we're going to run these in between just so that we can have some kind of a shock for the radiator, just because that's how you should do it. And the idea is, if you can see that ridge, we want this to come towards us, sit in a ridge right here. So we got to make sure this hole is just big enough for the shaft right there. Poke this through, and then this rubber is going to sit in between here and the radiator. So what I'm gonna do, I gotta get this plate whipped up, welded in, drilled out. This is overall a very simple, easy install. You could do this on your car if you wanted to get a radiator, just a radiator that wasn't even meant for your car. This is exactly how you can make it fit. So this right here, 16 gauge, 18 gauge scrap metal, kind of thick. I think it's 16 gauge. So I just got a kind of basic line drawn out of what I think I want it to be. And then now we'll go, I actually pulled the radiator out. We'll hold it up in there, and then I will draw out the rest of my line. So that right there is where it's going to be overlapped and welded. Now I gotta take this design, and then I'm just gonna run some straight lines off it. I'll put it over there, something like that, and then something like that, and then we'll go get this cut up. So I made my basic shape. Then I held it in there just so that way it could fit in there, because the metal before, there's no way that I could fit it in how it was. Then once we got it close enough, I'll take this. And then also, this is just a piece of scrap metal that I had laying around. I'll get it prepped out so that way it's a little bit cleaner too. All right. Alright, so now that I got it tacked out, I'm just going to go ahead and completely weld it, and then we'll worry about those holes, and then also making a perfect size hole for that grommet to pass through, for that little barbed edge to actually fit and not back out. Now that we have that welded out, the only thing left to do is drill our holes, and then that's going to be good. But I don't want to mount it for the final time because that's a nice new piece of equipment, so I don't want to be working around there. So I'm just going to push that off to the side for right now. Again, because all we got to do is drill the holes, bolt it in, and we'll be done. So I want to turn my attention to the expansion tank. So this, that has the steam port on the top. I'm just going to be using one of these on the bottom, and then it has an overflow right there. And my idea is, I want to sit it exactly like this, just perfectly right in there. And then at the bottom there's going to be a T, and that T is going to go into the heater core and over to the thermostat housing. And then the way that I want to mount it is, if you can see this mounting tab right here, that was just already on the car. So I want to take this piece of metal, which I already drew out. So that's the center line. This is the first bend, that's the other bend. So this is going to be the face, this is going to be the corner, that's going to be the corner, and then these are going to meet together in the back. So it's going to be just like this, and I actually did this for mock-up. So this sleeve is going to slide over the expansion tank, and then the expansion tank is going to fit in there. It'll all make a little bit more sense in a minute. I'm just going to go ahead and get this bent up, then we'll worry about the bracket and actually mounting it. So this little sleeve is going to hold the expansion tank. So as I started to bend this, I actually thought to myself, I want to put a little dimple die action in there. So what I did right there, that's just a 1-inch hole. And the way that this works is, this is a 1-inch shaft. That's going to go in there. That's going to press down. And then before we know it, and here we go. So that looks pretty good, pretty custom, kind of cool. A little bit better than just taking a piece of sheet metal, bending it around, and this actually looks like it was custom made because it was custom made. So now back to the bender. All right, so here we have the bracket. That's the piece that I just added in, and it's gonna hook down nicely. And I have my overflow just shooting out. That hooks into that bracket just like that. This comes down, but now the only thing is this is a little bit loose, so I don't want to leave it this way. So what I just whipped up really quickly, this is just a bracket going off, and that is a 90-degree bend, but it was on a plane, so that way it can come and catch this edge over there. So I think I'm going to go ahead and weld that shut. Once this is welded together completely, it won't be able to go anywhere, and then when you remove it, I just put a riv nut right here. Once you pull out that bolt, then you can just pop this right up, take it out, and that is perfect. That's looking really good, and we're knocking this thing out. So now that my French fry holder bracket is all good, I'm just gonna go ahead and hit it with the rattle can special. Usually I do stuff without using a rattle can, but it's just a bracket. I mean, it'll be fine. Now that that paint's drying, the next thing that I want to focus on, we want to focus on going back a little bit and actually getting the radiator installed. See, you work in different ways, so that way as one thing's drying, you can move on to the next thing. Or the radiator was easy to just push off to the side now that we're done with the expansion tank bracket, and I actually threw it in there. Looking pretty good. So I can't wait to see the black expansion tank with the contrast of the silver. So that's really good, and I just use high temp silver that I had from the motor, so that's gonna match the motor. It doesn't really matter, it's just a bracket. Either way, radiator mounted in. I just gotta drill 4 holes. One right there, one right there, one right there, one right there. You get the idea. This thing will be in before we know it. Man, that is really looking good. So now what I need to move on to is we need to worry about finishing out the engine bay. We got the radiator mounted, that's all good. Expansion tank mounted, that's all good. So all of these things were things that I needed to do before I could officially paint the engine bay. Now, like I said, all we got to do is worry about sanding it down, doing a little bit more body work, a little bit of seam sealer. And I also got some other stuff in mind to make it look a little bit more custom, and I could not be more excited for that. And that is all going to be on an upcoming video. So I'll see you on the next one. I'm out.